So we're going to look at the language of cataloging task force, which is an internal British Library thing. We'll also mention briefly the cyber attack that the British Library had at the end of October last year. Then we'll move on to talking about NII as a major new source of records for the British Library, and I don't know, possibly for some of your libraries as well. Then we'll have a look at transliteration, and that's actually a subject that already came up, but give a bit more information about that. Then we discovered that, in fact, in Japan, there is a sort of national level thing. So libraries in various parts of Japan are members of Nihon Shoshi Sakusei Benkyôkai, which is actually doing surprisingly similar things to the language of cataloging task force. So that was a rather pleasant surprise. Then we'll talk about meetings we had with curators in the British Library, and then I'll just give an idea of what we might be wanting to do in the future. Slide 3, please. Okay, so the language of cataloging task force was set up by something called the Future Cataloging Steering Group. This, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. So it is looking at how we should be cataloging in the future. And it set up various task forces, so us, the language of cataloging task force, but also sources of description. And we were actually just talking about those a moment ago. So, you know, which records can we use, which ones can we not use, this sort of thing. We also there was another one which will deal with the level of the bibliographic description, so full description, minimal description, and then everything in between, and how we gauge that. And last but not least, the quality of metadata task force. And as the work continued, it became very clear that all of these task forces are closely interlinked. I volunteered to chair the language of cataloging task force, possibly not realizing what I was letting myself in for, but in fact, it's been a lot of work, but it's been extremely enjoyable work. And initially, we started off with this really small idea of just lifting what had been a restriction. Before this work, we were only allowed to use language of cataloging English records. So it was really about lifting that restriction. I realized that North American colleagues had that restriction lifted some considerable time ago. So it's not rocket science, but you know, still an important aspect. And we have indeed had that restriction lifted from us. Slide 4, please. So I'm going to tell you how we did it, because it's very easy to skip over this aspect of any project, but in many ways, I think it's a very interesting aspect. So I started by contacting the catalogers and the acquisitions staff, and there were lots of us both in London and in Yorkshire, and we had no distinction between acquisition and cataloging, because a lot of acquisitions people start the cataloging process. So I'm not going to go mad by trying to say where acquisitions ends and cataloging starts. I mean, I don't think that's going to help us at all. Philosophy as regards meetings: come once or forever. So it means you're welcome to come to us just on one occasion, or you can come every single time. So the idea here is you only come if you're interested, and you can also come, of course, if you are nothing to do with acquisitions and cataloging at all, and you're just interested in some other aspect that we touch on. For example, racial equality. Those people were great, and they were pretty regular attendees. we banned physical meetings. And the reason behind this was that I was very, very keen that this would be all on the same level, that there would be no distinction. The people in the room would not have an advantage. So we were all on the same level and we were all virtual. No recording. And the reason for that is that as soon as you record something, everybody's on their best behavior. And I absolutely did not want that. I thought it would make it really difficult for us to work. And so we banned recording, but we did do notes. And in fact, you know, you could read our notes in probably less than 5 minutes and know exactly what we'd done. But what you didn't see was all of the, well, you know, all of the sort of ins and outs of discussions, and when we went down a rabbit hole and then came back again, and all of that stuff was abbreviated. The reason we've got the dominoes falling over is because it was very much, you know, we started with this tiny little thing of removing this restriction that we had to use language of cataloging English records. And then one thing led to another, and then we realized that the work was going to affect all sorts of areas of the library's work. And eventually the head cataloger came out with the recommendations will have an impact on the core principles at the library. That was the sentence. And you know, I'm just really glad that I didn't know that when I started out, because I think I would have just left screaming if I'd, you know, realized that something like that could happen. Slide 5, please. Bang. Right. So on one horrible morning at the end of October 2023, basically everything stopped working. And I mean everything. Wi-Fi, printers, website, oh gosh, catalog, of course. So it's sort of every librarian's worst nightmare. So all of these processes, all of our essential life systems switched off all of a sudden. But so basically we were in the situation where many of the colleagues in the language of cataloging task force, you know, these were experienced librarians, but they suddenly have no access to their cataloging systems. And of course, every cloud has a silver lining, because it was the golden time for doing this sort of work, thinking about what we might be doing in the future. So we seized that opportunity, and we looked around for our new sources, and we found the National Institute of Informatics as a major possible new source. Slide 6, please.
Yep. Hi, can you hear me? Good. So, to be honest, when we first spoke about NII records, the focus was only on Japanese language records. I mean, Washo, because I've been doing, and I'm a Japanese curator. Through the language of cataloging task force activities and discussion, Chris and I started to think about non-Roman script records created in Japan and collected in Naxos. Japan is historically, culturally, geographically, politically, and financially closer to Asian neighbors than most countries represented by EAJRS and our North American friends. NII records include foreign language Yosho records, not only Roman alphabet materials, but also non-Roman script materials, such as Persian, Sanskrit, Thai, Central Asian languages, and more and more and more. Immediately, we realized those records were high quality, and Chris was mentioning about the record structure.
Thank you. Yes, so as you know, with the Ni records, they are in CAT-P format, but we knew that Ni could provide us with records in something very close to Mark 21 because they'd done it for us. They'd given us sort of several tens of thousands of records a few years before. Slide 7, please. Lovely. So on the left, we have the Saini record. So this is in Cat P. And on the right, we have the Kyoto University record. I think that's rather difficult to read, but trust me, that is a pretty standard Mark 21 record. And the thing to note here is that if we had gone to the Library of Congress, we would have got a record for this book, but it wouldn't have had kanji and kana. So frankly, we are really much happier to have the Kyoto University record on this particular occasion. And also please note that this is a yes, Sanskrit record. And it's got the original Devanagari script in there. Slide 8, please.
To back up our discovery of NII records as international resources, Chris and I decided to start conversation with Japanese librarians in Japan. The main aim was finding out how they were doing. So NDL Kansai-kan is home of Asia Johoka. They introduced us. They have the seminar series on creating Asian languages bibliography. Check the URL. Chris shared British Library activities with them, and we found we had similar difficulties to deal with. They also passed us the contact detail of UPAL at the University of Tokyo, who had seminar series activities. So Tokyo University. Ueno project for the Asian Resource Library, bracket UPAL, had a series of the workshop on how to catalog Asian languages material. It depended on an individual's work, and when he retired in March 2024, the workshop went on hold. UPAL librarians keep in close touch with their academic researchers. The researchers contribute the Asian language parts, and the librarian makes them into the full bib data and do the cataloging on Naxos. Bukkyo University has a unique position in Japan. I have to emphasize very unique. They are a member of Naxos CAT, so that bib data and holding information are stored on NII. At the same time, they are OCLC members and using ALMA. In Japan, the majority of Naxos CAT members are using Naxos integrated library system. So it was a rare opportunity to see how Asian language record imported from Naxos are displayed in ALMA as Mark 21. They showed us Sanskrit and Thai records. Chris was really impressed, and since then, he keeps in close contact with them. Then we reported what we had discovered so far to NII. Librarian at Tokyo University suggested we see Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, Gaigodai. This is a university Chris studied at in his 20s. It's a good memories. They demonstrated how they catalog their items into their integrated library system. This was not possible to see at the University of Tokyo. Inputting the original languages is difficult, but transliteration generally follows LC and they at LCSH. Next slide, please. So next is inside of the British Library. When we had conversation with our colleagues at the British Library, I have spoken to 4 curators as our colleague. British Library colleagues helped to check non-Roman script records created by small dedicated team in Japan. The way I pull out records for them from Saini is putting the language code in advanced search. The picture is of tiny Thai record. Admittedly, it looks very different from Mark 21. Curators are happy that NII is using LC translations, but it differs from language to languages. You may find something useful. What's their comment?
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, the subject of transliteration came up over and over again. And so, to take this in context, Japanese is actually the most complex of the Library of Congress transliterations. I think the rules run to about 35 pages. I suspect the next edition of them will be even longer. And so we were keen to improve the quality of records. So, it's very good that Shusei Hibonshiki, so amended Hepburn, is being used along with the Library of Congress modifications to that. So Hepburn actually comes in lots of dialects. And you sort of look at it and go, oh, yes, I know it, I saw Shimbun is spelt with an M in the middle. So I know that this is the original edition of Hepburn, and it's rather like that. So anyway, we were very keen to sort of flag up things which would make the NI data even better. And so those were things like, keep on doing the LC transliteration. That helps us hugely. But also, if you can add transliteration for the statement of responsibility, the $245C, as we call it in Mark 21, and 264, the production field, then that would be that would be great. And we were wondering if somebody had a list of Japanese publishers with either katakana or transliteration or anything, because that is a major hole in our data at the moment. Last but not least, I just put this little picture about the difficult cases in the Library of Congress version of Hepburn. So I think a lot of us would expect ikanaru to be one word, but miryoku aru, teiko naki, dodo taru, osoru beki are also one word, which I think a lot of academics are quite surprised by. Benkyou suru and that sort of situation is also one word. Intriguingly, I spent so much time in that document, you wouldn't believe it. I think I got slightly obsessed by it, to be honest. But the really intriguing thing is actually kirena. And so I honestly don't know what they do with kirena. I think it's probably two words, but when we look at something like ikanaru and dodo taru, then I'm not sure. So, that's something I would actually really like to ask the Library of Congress, because, that really is something we need to know. It's a really basic question, and I don't think the answer's in the 35-page version, which is why I rather suspect that it could get longer. Yes, please, next slide. Okay, so what next? So we have decided to make these changes. We will be allowing non-language of cataloging English records. We will allow Japanese and Chinese and various others. But that requires a huge amount of training and support. So that will actually have its own dedicated group to do all of that. And then lots of networking, so sharing information. That's why I'm here. That's part of that. Then next, actually, Nihon Shoshi Sakusei Benkyôkai is meeting on the 23rd of October, and they will be talking about Vietnamese, which we tend to use in the Unicode world as being the language which puts the Latin alphabet under the most strain, because they, a lot of languages decorate once, a lot of languages decorate twice. Vietnamese maybe 3-4 times, but it is all there in Unicode, so it should all, it should be all keyable and it should display correctly. Yeah, with a good wind. And then last but not least, it's very much promoting Ni non-Roman script records. So this means not just the Japanese ones. It does mean the Thai, the Sanskrit, the all sorts of other languages. You may be wondering why on earth I have the cheek to stand here and talk to you about all these other languages, but the reality is that a lot of us are cataloging more than not just Japanese, but we're doing something else. So it's a two-way process. So I hope that Japanese catalogers will be able to benefit from the work we do in Europe on these various languages. So I think it does make sense to have a cooperation. And I think that was all I was intending to say, actually. But yes, any questions at the end?
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's now time for question and comments. 質問と、コメントありますか?
Thank you very much. I have a comment on the situation of Romanization of Japanese publishers. So there is on the website of the University of Tübingen in Germany a list. I don't know how exhaustive it is, but there is a list of Romanized publisher names, which was compiled by Miss Mariko Adachi, who was a librarian at Zurich University. And I can give you the link if you'd like, and yes, you can use it as a reference.
That sounds fantastic. Yasuyo, do we have any other lists of publishers? Ooh, excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. For the list of publishers, I didn't talk about it in my presentation, but I have a script that automatically adds in all the spaces to the Japanese publisher names. So I think I have 200 publisher names so far. And yeah, so I can help you with that to some extent. I think.
That sounds extremely kind, Adam. Thank you very much.
And Berlin State Library, Staatsbibliothek zu Berlin, is also using Naxos for cataloging. It's our typewriter, if I may say so. We also download the data, and a colleague wrote a script for us to turn it more or less into the Pika format. And I'm sure we can help you with that. And it's not Mark 21, and it's for the German library system, but maybe it gives you ideas or might be helpful. And for us, it's Naxos is a savior. We couldn't do without it. And I'm always in great debt to the colleagues of the National Institute of Informatics and all the librarians in Japan who catalog all the books ahead of us so that we may use their wonderful cataloging data. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ursula. We are former Allegro users, so we know all about Pika.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Oh, sorry, there was someone agree. Okay, just I had a small question. You guys are in contact with the Japanese network of people who catalog and debate on these rules. Would it be at all possible to maybe organize some sort of online event for catalogers here in Europe? So for a Q&A, for exchanging experiences, is that something you could possibly facilitate?
I mean, it's very early days, and I'm keen that we go quite slowly, a step at a time. But yeah, in the
I'm not hearing it, no.
Well, we are very much aware at the moment, having very few systems actually working, that actually this library business is a really long-term thing, and so yeah, and so we are quite happy to make gradual progress in doing nice things like that. Yes.
So thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to, I'm not cataloger, but last actually last time, the Council of East Asian Library in the US, we had a little bit of the workshop of prompt engineering, and by Harvard Chinese digital scholar, Dr. Goriong Tang. Anyway, so he was like doing all the prompting engineering to make a, create MAC record from the bibliographic record and all that kind of thing. And from that, I heard from him that he is working to do transliteration work on that. So with the Library Congress catalog person, her name is, I think, Jolene Zoom. She's next president of CO, but they are both not Japanese language people. So I think there's gonna needs to be some collaboration with people like you, because it worked for Korean language, but as you said, Japanese is much challenging. So I think when you are speaking networking, I think that's kind of thing, maybe I'm able to connect.
We're certainly open to well, as with Library of Language of Cataloging Task Force, we are fundamentally very open to new members or new people being interested. I think in the early stages it will be to a great extent virtual, but beyond that, I hope we can manage more and more physical meetings.
Thank you. I mean, in Furigana wise too, NDL I'm sure is doing something.
Yes, I mean, often if it's possible to get it into katakana, then it's possible to get it into some kind of transliteration.
Right. Now it's time to close the session 5. Thank you very much.
最後に一言、皆様、EAJRS でナクシスワークショップであったりとか、ナクシスミーティングとか、やってたんですけれども、私自身、そのカタローギングのトレーナーを平野さんと一緒にやっておりまして、長年、ナクシスレコードに関わるのは日本語だけだとずっと考えてました。でも実は要所のところに皆様のカバーしているエリアではないかもしれませんけれども、皆様の同僚にとって思いがけないリソースがあるかもしれないということをお伝えしたいです。そして私たちはもうすでにナクシスアカウントを持っておりますので、これから新たに申請をしたりとかすることもなく、私たちが使っている ID で同僚がログインをして、そこから情報を引き出すということもすでにできます。なので、皆様のご同僚にもしかしたらあなたが探している難しい言語の書士があるかもしれないですよというふうに進めてあげるのもいいかもしれません。ありがとうございます。